And let me share my screen. Oops. Okay. I guess we can start here. Are there any questions or anything we should talk about or anything like that? Okay, well, I'll start out here. This is catch-up week. The way I usually use fall term is 1 week longer than other terms, except it's not really 1 week longer. It's 1 week not longer as we count, but there's enough holidays that it's about the same length, which is why they make it 1 week longer. So the way I typically use the extra week is as a catch-up week with really nothing new assigned. And it's your chance to, catch up on anything that's not in, turn in anything you want. I don't care how old it is, get it turned in. And if, let's see, you can turn in quizzes, you can add extra discussions. I'm a little bit behind on reading discussions, but that I need to do that in the next few days. And I've got a few papers that need graded too, but I'm not really behind there. I guess the quizzes I have closed at a certain date. If anyone needs a quiz reopened, email me or tell me or contact me and I'll reopen it for you. So if you haven't taken a quiz, get a hold of me. And we'll get it opened for you. Okay. That's where we're at on everything. In terms of a lecture for today, it's a catch-up week. I don't want to go through new material. So I've got some stuff to talk about, but it's not from the book. It's, it's just other stuff. I guess I'll start out by saying it took me a little while. I had to rewrite Lab 8 for the module for last week. It's rewritten, it's up and available, and I think here someplace. After thinking about Lab 8, we did a lot of stuff in Module 8, and like about 3 different topics. And I wasn't quite sure how well we did the basic storage topic, because I tried to cover that a little bit on Module 5, and it didn't actually, Module 5 didn't actually have you create a disk drive. And that's sort of really understanding that really well is a precursor to Logical Volume Manager. So the way I've done this is I've gone back, and what I want you to do is just fiddle with basic storage management. Let's see. What I want you to do is add a disk to your system. And this is, if you do this, if some people, this will be really old hat to, other people, not so much. So, and I want to get everybody where it's not so much, or where, I mean, everybody where it's old hat. So what I'd like you to do is add a disk drive to your system. You can do that in two ways. You can either do that as adding a disk drive to your system by adding a virtual disk drive to your system, or you can do it by just using a USB thumb drive. I don't care. Either way works. That puts a new disk drive on your system. And then I'd like you to fiddle with partitioning the disk drive. And you can partition the disk drive using a number of programs. The program that I typically use, well, usually I type in fdisk, since I've been typing in fdisk for 30 years. But fdisk has really been replaced by gdisk. So the program I recommend using is gdisk. The book uses parted. There's no difference between them. Parted has been around for 30 or 40 years too. Most of the people I know use gdisk. But parted is there, and it's a perfectly good program. Take your choice. It's up to you. There is also a program, I guess it's not in Red Hat. You can, using DNF, you can add it to Red Hat, called gparted. And gparted is a graphical user interface for parted that a lot of the installation programs for a lot of distributions use something that's sort of like gparted. It's just basically a graphical way of doing it. I haven't used it that much. Well, yeah, I've used it. It's not my favorite way. I'd rather just do it with gdisk. It's easier. Then you don't get all this nonsense about graphical user interfaces. Anyway, gdisk is easy for that. And then format your disk using something like MKFS, or of course there are a million alternatives to MKFS. MKFS -- we get things like mkfs.ext2, .ext3, well, all the you get a variation for all the different formatting styles that your system supports. My system here supports the ones down below. And actually what MKFS is, I believe, I've never read the source code for it, but I think MKFS basically just is a junction box that forks into all these various programs, because each one of them is really quite different. let's look at what we've got on the Red Hat system.
Should I try using FAT32?
Yeah, FAT32 is fine. Oh, yes, actually, what I would like you to do is I would like you to use 2 or 3 different formats and then look at the differences, study the differences between these formatting systems. What you're going to find is that, and maybe you won't find it, but if you do enough probing, what you will find is that if you use something like FAT32, which is a fine file system, we would not have this on our system if it wasn't a good file system. If you use something like NTFS or FAT32, what will happen is they make a fine file system. The disk, you can move it to a Windows machine, you can move it to a Mac, you can move it anywhere. That's what's really nice about NTFS or FAT32, especially FAT32, or the FAT file systems. But what you will find is on Linux, because they don't deal with inodes and the internals of Linux, you'll find that the permission systems are really hokey. They don't work right. They work good enough that you can use them just fine. But I wouldn't want to use it if I had if I had multiple users trying to use that disk at the same time. Because it's likely one person has access to everything on it and nobody else has any access or something. The access rights just won't be right. Whereas if you use ext4 or one of the XFS, one of the Unix style ones, the access rights are really great. But of course, then if I take that to my Windows machine, I don't know if Windows has learned how to read Linux disk or not. I think probably not. There was a day and age, I think there was somebody that sold I think it was a proprietary program for Windows that would let it do an ext2 or ext3, but basically those are Unix only disk. I'd even say they were Linux only disk, although I think you can move a lot of those file formats to a FreeBSD system, I believe. Anyway, that's the big difference. So what I'd like you to do is at least do one that is formatted for a Unix system. I don't care, ext4, XFS, doesn't matter. And one that is formatted for a Windows type system like FAT32.
Yeah, it's actually perfect because I'm modding an old PlayStation right now, so I have to put FAT32 on a drive so I can transfer files between the PlayStation and my Windows.
Yeah, and we do that. That's why that's so common. We do that all the time to transfer files. I mean, plus, anytime you buy one of these, they don't come with Linux format on them. They come with a universal format of some sort. So, so you get used to using the Windows stuff or the universal stuff on a Linux machine. And it's really important to be able to use them on a Linux machine. Okay. a giveaway for um, that assignment is one of the just sort of dumb questions that I ask is when I type in MK, whoops. Okay, here's my Red Hat system. We'll do full screen so that we know we're in Red Hat. Okay, here's my Red Hat system. If I do MKFS, I get several options here. There's an option MKFS.MS-DOS. There's an option for VFAT, whatever VFAT is, and there's an option for FAT. Those are all kind of DOS type files. I don't know what the heck's going on there. And if I type man space mkfs.fat, it will tell me a lot about the system. Okay, and then I type this for VFAT. And it looks like the same darn thing, the documentation. So my question is, what is the difference between those various, what's the difference between the FAT file format, the MS-DOS file format, and the VFAT format? Is there any? Is it possible that's the same program? Suppose we type where is mkfs.fat. Okay, that tells me where that program is. It tells me where the man page is. I don't care where the man page is at the moment, but it tells me where the executable file is. So let's type, let's just see what this is. If I type file space, the file name, it says that this is an ELF 64-bit ELF file, which basically is for a Intel processor, an Intel x86-64 processor. That really just means that that's an executable program. So let's go over here. Okay, and what do we get here for MKFS MS-DOS? What is that guy? Well, that's a link to MKFAT. That means when I type in mk.ms-dos, what it actually executes is the mkfs.fat program. When I type that for the VFAT, what it actually executes is the mkfs.fat program. So indeed, that's three names for the same thing. If you go up here, this is intriguing. Notice what the size of that file is. And notice the size of this file. Those are all 136 kilobytes big. It's surprising that those are identical. I don't know why those aren't links. They're not links, but maybe they're the same. So we should be able to find that out by doing a diff. A comparison. A diff is does a what comparison of our files, compares our two files. So we will do a diff between this and that. And it comes back with nothing. If I recall the way the diff program works, if it comes back with nothing, it means they're identical. If there's differences, it will come back with a list of the differences. So guess what? Those are the same files too. Why they made 3 copies of them instead of making a links between them, I don't know, but I don't care either. That's fine. And your on Red Hat, there doesn't seem to be an MKFS dot NTFS. I looked around and I couldn't, I don't know. I mean, I didn't work very hard at it. I couldn't get that thing. I tried to install that as a software. I tried to install NTFS support as software on Red Hat. And I think I installed it so I can read an NTFS file, but I can't seem to write one. I have the suspicion that that software isn't considered stable enough to support on Red Hat, but it works on OpenSUSE, it works on Ubuntu, it works elsewhere. Remember, Red Hat is really, really picked out to be very, very stable software because people are running robots on Mars using Red Hat. You don't want it to fail. It's expensive when it fails. So occasionally Red Hat won't do something as sophisticated as the newest as Fedora will, because Fedora is Red Hat software that will take more risk. And so they may run a program that is too risky to put into Red Hat. So, but the result is Red Hat is rock stable. And likewise, in the SUSE world, I think if you actually use the paid copy of SUSE Enterprise Linux, which I haven't used in many years now, it is also, you know, rock stable and thus probably lacks some software that OpenSUSE has, because that's their development platform. Okay. Well, that's basically what happens in this in the lab for module 8. And then down at the very, very bottom, because I really want people to feel comfortable writing Bourne shells, so I have to add a Bourne shell program. This is really, really small. You don't have to write much of anything. I suspect you could do this by just writing one long command at the end of the cron job and not writing a Bourne shell at all. But if you have a disk, particularly external disk drives, but well, maybe even internal ones, nowadays we want to save energy. So in order to save energy and save the world, we make a lot of disk drives so they will automatically go into hibernation mode after they haven't been hit for a few minutes. So they will go to sleep on you. And then if you go to use that drive, it can take, I don't know, 10 seconds or more for the drive to spin up so that you can use it. And sometimes that's annoying. I mean, that's a good thing. That's why they do it. But sometimes it's annoying. As an example, if I go out and buy a cheap drive, like, well, from Fry's, that's been dead for a long time, like from Amazon, just a consumer drive, which are quite good, and I put it on my server, which is actually what I do rather than buying the server drives that are 3 times the cost. But if I put that drive on my server, then if somebody comes to my web page, but the web page hasn't been hit in 5 minutes, they've got a 10-second delay to get the web page, or something like that. I don't like that. There are many times that I don't like that drive to spin down. It's annoying. So one way to prevent the drive from spinning down is put up a cron job that will just touch a file on that drive every, say, 5 minutes, which is what I do. And actually, one of the programs I used for it, I copied here. This is the program. And I don't know why I put this in. It's a little short program and it doesn't do anything. It's got a lot of wasteful documentation up here. Well, no, it doesn't have wasteful documentation. You do want to document your programs. It's got a thing that basically tests to see that I'm actually David Mandel, because this program says that it only wants David Mandel to execute it. Oh, it's even got a line that I use in the cron job to execute the program. And it's got a couple if statements to say what computer it's being, it's got if statements depending on what computer it's being used on. And all it does is it touches a file. That's really about the only command you need, is the command that touches a file every 5 minutes. Anyway, I just want people to get used to thinking in terms of Bourne shells in cron files and cron jobs, because they can do a lot for you. Okay. That takes care of that. So the question is, what should we talk about for the rest of the day? I don't want to cover new material out of the book or out of the systems administration. So I thought maybe we'd just talk a little bit about application software. You know, we'll just, maybe you'll get something from this, but one of the things that, you know, I don't know if this is a systems administrator's job or not, but it probably is. Is people ask you, what application should I use for this? Or what application should I use for that? And my role often has blended together between being a software developer and a mathematician and a Unix systems administrator, and maybe a little bit of teacher. I mean, it all kinds of blends together in practice. And I think we're going to see this more and more. We're going to see fewer and fewer Unix systems administrators that are just purely Unix systems administrators. Most of them are going to be doing something else as well as administrating systems. Yes, big companies like Facebook will have Unix systems administrators. But speaking of Facebook, some people sort of badmouth BTRFS as a file system, and especially people that promote ZFS. ZFS is a fine file system, but all of Facebook, as I understand, all of their servers, every place in the world, which they probably have, you know, 1 million servers, I don't know. They use BTRFS on it, or yeah, they use the Btrfs file system, which I just thought was interesting. So there's at least one big player that is really sold on that file system. Okay. Getting back here, one of the things that a system administrator needs to do is needs to know a little bit about application software, because somebody has to figure out what application what software you need to solve a certain problem. And that goes with one of the nice things about Linux is it's got lots of applications that are open source and free of charge. And I will even go a little further. I just read an interesting article, a little short article by Stephen von Nichols. Stephen is a long-term open source journalist, and maybe he does some consulting too, I don't know. He's probably about my age. And he wrote this little article bemoaning the fact that he can't buy software anymore for his Windows machines. I guess he has a Windows, he has some Windows machines, I guess. But he can't buy software, you know, like the shrink wrap software that Bill Gates made his fortune on, that you own. That so much software now runs on the cloud. So, and you know, there's certain and a lot of it you don't even own, you kind of rent. You're using software as a service. And some of this stuff is getting kind of expensive. He was saying that to run a full system of Adobe software was now costing about $60 a month. And, you know, I think Microsoft Office is going that route. It won't be that expensive, but they're basically pushing to, it's not just software you load on your system and you have on your system. And what Stephen was saying, well, that Linux is the last operating system around where you can just get software that runs on your system, and you don't have to be web connected. So it may be, you know, the future of software you actually own rather than renting. I don't know. In any case, let's look at a few applications and categories of applications, and we're going to do this kind of informally here, but here's a few categories of things that we can look at: office automation, web browsing, web development, database software, graphical software. Probably ought to look at video software too. Video software. Diagramming tools. Geographic information systems, computer mapping. CAD, scientific software, which is my excuse to mention R. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about what I use for office automation. I guess I think of office automation being things like word processing, making slides, presentation, little drawings, things like that. Well, the one that I use that I guess I've used for 50 years is Emacs with ROF, which I use a little bit. I used to, back before we had word processors, I used that a lot. That was really the first word processors around. I think we called that runoff at that time. That was before the ROF series was really out. But and I just use that with Emacs, and mostly I use that for writing man pages, Unix man pages, because Unix man pages are still kept in a GROF, TROF format. So that's probably the only thing I use it for, but I do use it for that. Everything else I do office automation wise, I use LibreOffice for personally. And what's LibreOffice have? Well, I'm in LibreOffice right now. Or the history behind LibreOffice is way back when on Unix systems before Linus was born, no, before Linus wrote Linux, there was a word processing system or an office automation system you could buy, proprietary system for most Unix systems called Star Office. And that's where I first became familiar with things, is I had a copy of Star Office. It came out of Germany, and it was pretty decent. It maybe not as good as MS Word, but it was good. I used it a lot as my office automation system when I was using Unix systems. Proprietary Unix systems, that is. And then when Linux came out, pretty early after Linux came out, the Star Office people, I think they may have sold the company, but it's the same people. The people stayed. But they negotiated a lot of things so that they could take Star Office and rewrite it a little bit and call it Open Office. And so it was the Star Office people that came up with Open Office. And Open Office was then made open source. It's tricky to take software that is proprietary and make it open source sometimes, because often when you have proprietary software that you wrote, you may have bought certain libraries to help you write that software that you don't own. So sometimes you may want to take software you wrote and make it open source, but you don't own the complete rights to it. So either you got to rewrite things that you don't own, or else you've got to make deals. It just gets hard. Um, anyway, the open office people, the Star Office people were able to make open office, which they made open source. Eventually, that was bought. Well, that was bought by Olivetti, and which is a Italian company. They were happy at Olivetti, but Olivetti sold their software and computer stuff to Oracle. A lot of At that time, a lot of people didn't like Oracle. They still don't. A lot of open source people. So many open source projects got forked when Oracle bought them. Two of those projects that got forked one was Open Office. The people that developed Open Office didn't like the didn't want to go to Olivetti, so they started LibreOffice. And that's why LibreOffice is so close to Open Office, because it's the same people and it's the same code base. It's just a fork. The other really big package that happened to was MySQL. MySQL became part of Oracle when Sun purchased DEC, I guess it was. The developers working on MySQL didn't like that. So they forked, and MySQL was always a mess. The license on MySQL is a mess. It's supposed to be kind of open source, but it isn't totally open source. And they've always been license issues, but people use it as though it's open source until they get sued. So the developers on that forked that and formed MariaDB. So today you hear a lot of stuff about MariaDB. Well, that's actually the MySQL development team. They also had to rewrite quite a bit of code, and I believe they fixed errors in MySQL, philosophical errors. And so MariaDB is a cleaner version of MySQL than MySQL. Well, anyway, that's the story with LibreOffice. And LibreOffice has, it's like OpenOffice. It's got many, many sub portions to it. It's got a word processor. It's got a spreadsheet program that works quite well and is also compatible with Excel, more or less. It can read Excel files. The word processor can read and write MS Office files. The presentation manager can read, maybe it can write PowerPoint files pretty well. They have a drawing package, like MS Word has a draw, or like Microsoft Office has a drawing package. I've never used. I don't like it, and maybe that's just me. The other packages are really good though. They have a database package that I think is pretty good. It's a little like Microsoft Excel. I'm not sure it's quite as good as Microsoft Excel, but it's good. And one of the nice things about it is you can either use LibreOffice's database, or you can make it work with other databases like MySQL or Postgres. So you can use their database program with other database with big, hefty, heavy-duty databases. I've explored that. I've never really done it much, but if I was serious about database, I probably would explore that in a lot of detail. I think they've got something here for writing like HTML documents and stuff. I've used that a bit. I don't know how good it is. I don't use it. I've tried it, but I don't use it. It is what you see is what you get, you know. They also have a macro programming language, very much like the one in MS Office. MS Office has a programming language in it that is MS Office Basic or something like that. The one in LibreOffice isn't totally compatible. Yeah, well, maybe it's a long ways from compatible with Microsoft's, but it is it's a programming language a lot like that. Okay. Anyway, if you don't know LibreOffice, it's a good, it really is a good tool. I was going to say another, I don't know if this is office automation, but something I do all the time is to, or at least I used to do all the time, was to write DVDs or CDs. In fact, I will say I purchased a CD writer in the 1980s, I think, way back when. And before anybody could burn CDs, this was probably one of the early CD burners. And this was CD, not DVD. It was for burning GIS software. And fortunately, it wasn't my money. It was your money. It was taxpayers' money. It cost around $10,000, and it worked beautifully. It cost so much because you couldn't just put a CD burner into a MS-DOS computer at that time. So basically, when they sent it to you, it was a whole thing, including a little Unix computer. So $10,000 probably wasn't a bad deal on it. Came from Young Mind Software out of Denver, Colorado. Anyway, today we have other tools for burning CDs and DVDs. There's quite a collection of tools for that. The one that I use, I don't think it's installed on this computer. Maybe it is. Okay, we'll see. I've never ran it on this computer, but okay, it's just a graphical tool like this for burning DVDs. And what you do is you get a whole collection of things in a directory that you want to burn onto a DVD. At some point you say, make that collection into a DVD, and the software up here, there's lots of options, but it will take that, it will copy that directory into one file, an ISO file, like the ones you download with your Linux distributions on it. And it basically will form one file. And then the second step is burn that to a DVD, which is also done by this software. There's lots of software for doing that. I like K3B. Let's see. There's one here that's very popular called XCD Roast. I've used that in the past. It works well. There's, well, there's hundreds of them here, but there's one called Brassio or something like that that's very popular. I don't think I've used it, but well, anyway, so much for that. Going back here. And of course, if you can do this from a GUI, you should be able to do this from a command line because I'm a command line kind of guy. And you can do this from a command line. There is a command line called make ISOFS. What that will do, and I don't remember how it works entirely, but it's a command line that will take a directory of stuff and make an ISO file out of it. And then you can, step two, you can burn that ISO file onto your DVD using something like CD record. Or actually, you could get away with doing that with the DD command too. As I recall, CD record handles error processing slightly better than the DD command, but either one of those will work. And indeed, I've done this. I remember one company in particular that had some files that they ran their business on. It was a trucking company. And they ran their business off of their daily business. And basically they wanted to be able to store their accounts receivable and maybe their contact list every night after they went home. So if they lose their hard disk, they don't lose everything. I wrote a little program that used these two commands to actually, I think my program was probably Bourne Shell. I'm not absolutely sure, but it was it would use make ISO FS to create an ISO image. It would then burn that on the DVD and or CD. I don't remember which. CD, I think. I don't remember. It would then burn that, and basically the receptionist, when she came in the morning, would take the DVD out of the machine and label it, put it into a drawer, put a new blank DVD in, and it worked quite well. And hopefully she also once a week or so checked the DVDs to make sure that everything was working. That is really crucial, to always make sure your backup actually backed things up. And I could tell you sad stories about when that didn't happen. Okay. Well, let's take our break here. 10-minute break. Be back at 10:05. My coffee's very cold. Okay. Anybody else have favorite software they like that they find useful?
Like specifically Linux software.
Open source, maybe, or actually not. Uh, Closed source software you'd like to find an open source equivalent for?
Um, I use IDM, Internet Download Manager. It's not, I don't think it's open source. I just like pay for a year of it, but it's pretty nice software because I can download all my YouTube videos and basically any video or most videos on most sites, which is pretty nice. Anything MP4 really.
Okay.
But it
Okay.
would be good to find a free and open source version.
Yeah, I don't use anything like that. Actually, how does that work? Can you when it downloads a YouTube video, does it just take the video or does it get the meta information too?
I think it separates the information. It gives you like a couple separate files. Like you can download the information, or you can download the 360p version, or you can download the 720 version. So it kind of separates all that information,
Okay.
which is pretty nice.
Because I just keep track of mine by hand, kind of. And it's not, sometimes it's inconvenient. I'm just now looking at a project where I've got to make a lot of videos. And actually, I don't make the videos. Somebody else has made them, but they'd like them put up on, they're made in a weird format. And they want them made into a more standard format. And then put on YouTube or something of that type. And
Yeah, well, even changing the format is kind of kind of takes a sec.
yeah, I don't have too much trouble changing the format. I can handle that, but I'm finding some of these are in 20 minutes. They're hour episodes in 20-minute segments. So I've got to do a little bit of editing to put them together in one video. It's a mess. Um,
Yeah, I haven't really done much video editing, but I can definitely understand why people uh make a living or are just paid just to edit videos because it certainly is time consuming.
yeah, I haven't done too much video editing. And I often question how well some of the video editing software works. I've had a lot of it blow up on me, and but that may be lack of memory. I've now got bigger machines, and things seem to be working better. I'm not
Great
sure.
for that.
What?
DaVinci Resolve is really the top-notch program for that, and it is available for Linux. For the free version does basically everything that Premiere would do commercially.
Okay, what program is that?
DaVinci Resolve.
Okay, I'll have to look at that.
Yeah.
Um, I've been using things like OpenShot. I think it's called OpenShot. OBS, um, and FFmpeg. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I've been meaning to get into photo editing as well, but I've only used Photoshop just a little bit. Didn't really feel like paying much more for it, so it'd be nice if I could find a more open source one.
Try GIMP.
Yep. Yeah.
What's it called?
GIMP.
Oh, okay.
Let's. I'm not very good with GIMP. but I have used it a fair bit. And this guy, well, you can open an image file. You can do, it will do most things Photoshop will do. It does it well. It's, I don't know that Photoshop's friendly. This is a little less friendly than Photoshop. But it's very powerful. And actually GIMP, along with a few add-ons to GIMP, was, in terms of, is it powerful enough? It was used a great deal in rendering the water scenes for the movie Titanic. When
Pretty impressive.
when the ship was going down, and so it can be used on big things, and it works quite well. It's got lots of features. Really, the only drawback to GIMP is there is a real learning curve to it, and what it does is raster-based editing, or exactly what you want for photo editing. It's a good tool.
Give that a try. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll go back here and we'll talk just about a few things that there's, when it comes to the web, there's web browsing software, there's Chromium, which is probably what I mostly use, Firefox, which I use as my secondary browser or whatnot. I use Firefox a lot. And there's dozens of other browsers. There's one called Thorium Browser that I've started to use a little bit. It's kind of a rewrite of Chromium, and so far I rather like it, actually. Conquer, and Epiphany are browsers. The one is a browser built for the KDE graphical environment, although you can run it in GNOME. The other one is built for the GNOME environment, although you can run it in KDE. And they're decent browsers. They're not great. Anyway, you've got browsers up the wall. However, if you really want to browse and you're a command line type guy, you don't want all these fancy graphical user interfaces. Yes, I know some people say web browsing is about graphical user interfaces, but some of us grew up before we had graphical user interfaces. So we want to browse using the command line. One command for that is called wget. What wget does, if we go down here and do a man page on wget, maybe. Let's see if it says what it does. Well, anyway, the story with wget is, suppose I want to get a copy of a website that has a lot of web pages in it. wget will allow me just to download the whole website in one command. It's got lots of options, and there are things where wget doesn't work terribly well, because wget, but if I have a static website, if it's a dynamic website that's developed from a database, wget's not going to work terribly well on it. But if you've got a static website and you want to get a whole copy of it, wget works beautifully. It's a very useful program. I don't know. There must be options for that to put a website up to a web server too. That I don't know. I've only used it for downloading things. but I've used it quite a lot. It's really good. Another, well, Emacs will do anything because Emacs is an operating system, even if, hiding in an editor. So, of course, there are, maybe I shouldn't call this maybe Emacs W3M should go on the line up above with interactive websites rather than command line ones, but there is a web browser for Emacs. There's also a program called curl and links spelled differently and a few other things. I've never used links spelled differently, but the first two, curl and links, what those are is they are web browsers that work from a command line. Let's look at links. Calligator.org. Whoop. Well, that's impressive. Not. What went wrong? Maybe I spelled it wrong. That doesn't look right, does it?
It's a Calligator.
How about that? Okay, it likes me to spell better, but anyway, this gives, I know this doesn't seem very impressive, but this gives me the ability to browse from a website or browse at a command line. Oh, well, it's slow, but I don't know. Anyway, why would you ever want to use that? And curl does really the same thing. Curl is even more command line oriented than links. And they both allow you to run web browsers from a command line. The reason you want to do that is you read all these things about people that write these, what do they call them, robots, or these programs that go over the internet and scour the internet looking for various things. That's done from a command line. And that's exactly why you need something like curl or links. It is, you can write programs that will interact with websites without doing it yourself, which is really useful. I've certainly done that at times, and I can certainly think of a couple websites that I'd like to write some software that would help me. Well, let's look at an example. Suppose you're looking at a website that lets you select hotels or someplace to stay, and it makes you go to every site individually to well, no. Suppose you're going to you want to look at a hotel site and you want to look at where to stay, and you've got some flexibility in the number of days you stay or the days you go because you're retired. A lot of websites, they make you look, they make you choose the dates, and then they will show you if there's any openings. And wouldn't it be nice if you had a program that would go in and do that for a whole mess of dates and then come back with a list of reasonable options that have openings? Often that has to be done manually, and it can take you several hours. Well, several hours before you give up with the whole process in order to find someplace you want to go and your time schedule and minimize your cost of going. In that sort of situation, you use something like links or curl to bring down to do a lot of submissions, bring back the data, analyze it, and give you reasonable results that you can use. In other words, you're doing the exact same thing that Kayak is doing, only for a particular situation. I mention this because I'm a member of a travel club whose website is totally frustrating. and I keep thinking I should really write something to get around the system. Okay. Tools for writing, for doing web development. One thing, there are lots of things that I don't know much about, but oh heck, I don't know. Let's just kill a lot of these things. Okay, we're going to do a search here for whoops, back there. HTML. Whoop, we'll do open source. HTML editors. It always seems like a pain to me to write HTML for as many years as I've done it, but for Linux. Okay, here's a few here. Best HTML editors. Now, actually, LibreOffice has an HTML editor built into it. I've never been terribly impressed with it, but it's there. VI, well, that's, doesn't help much. I don't know. Okay, Bluetooth is one that I do use. Whoops. Or Bluefish. Bluefish is an HTML editor that does things for you like, I was just using Bluefish, and basically that is Emacs. I don't need that. Okay. What Bluefish will do is you bring up a page in Bluefish, and what it does is it pairs things up so that if you have a like a list, here's an unordered list. If you it will either display your unordered list for you, or you can collapse it where it's not displayed. It will also, it gives you good pairings of your like the li should end in a /li, and it basically just won't let you get by without having your tags paired. It does the pairings for you and enforces pairings. Yeah, it's pretty good about such things. And it's got helps for writing tables, for writing lists, for writing CSS, so on and so forth. And then the way it does the what you see is what you get is it basically just sends whatever you're doing out to your browser and displays things in your browser. Some of these tools will actually display things itself as it goes. Others use an external browser. So that's what Bluefish looks like. I think Bluefish tends to be one of the older HTML editors. I suspect there's many that are better than Bluefish, but Bluefish is the one that I've been using off and on for years. Not always happy with it. Brackets is another one that I think is pretty decent. It's got a lot of garbage ones in here. Emacs has an HTML mode. I write HTML in Emacs all the time. I wouldn't call it an HTML editor though. The same goes with Kate. But there are a lot of HTML editors. I guess what I'm saying is there really are a lot of things in this category to look at. I haven't been writing I haven't looked at the idea of using a HTML editor in a long time, so I'm not up to date on what the best is out there. I'm just saying there are a lot of things to look at in that category. Going back here, the other thing to look at is content management packages. This is more for web development. If you want to develop websites, one of the best ways I think to develop websites is to use a content management package because they will do a lot of things for you. There's actually Wikipedia has a good entry here. Okay, what a content management package is it is a framework for writing websites. They vary a lot. What they normally do is they keep the content that you write. They usually store that in a database management package. Often they store a lot of the things for the website in a content management package, and they will provide you with things like an authentication system, so your users have to log in, or you can turn that off and anybody can look at anything. They just give you a framework for developing websites. And I highly recommend when you develop big complex websites, to start with a content management package, because starting from scratch, which I have done, it gets really nasty and really involved because the way websites work, they're just not built for what we use them for. There's a lot of overhead to building a website that can interact with users, the sort of website that, you know, comes back and asks, please give me your bank account number. And you type in your bank account number and it goes out, and then your bank account information is fetched out of a database, and they put a lot of HTML around that database and they send it back to you. And then you say, write a check, you know, based on this, or pay a bill based on this. And they go back and they got to go back to the database. Really, the way we do websites, it just wasn't meant for that. But we're doing that all the time. So, and you can do it, but our web protocols weren't designed for that exactly. So the result is the programmers that write that type of software, there's an enormous amount of overhead to doing that and doing it right. And all of these CMSs do take care of many of those things. And so all you have to worry about is the content and making the site look good. As an example of, I mean, there's hundreds of these packages. I've used quite a few of them actually, or a few. Geeklog is a good system for keeping log, or basically for blogging. Joomla is an interesting one. Joomla is started out as Mambo. Mambo is a CMS that lets you do, it's basically for developing kind of general purpose type websites, like maybe a club website. And it works well. They got into, the Mambo developers got into a dispute with the company that owned Mambo. So they spun it off and they developed Joomla, which has become more popular than Mambo, I think. Wikimedia is the software used for building, is a piece of software used for building wikis. In particular, Wikimedia is the software used for building Wikipedia. And, but you can use it to build your own wiki if you want. I have built wiki sites using Wikimedia. It's good, it's decent, it's easy to use. Well, yeah, I mean, it's relatively easy to put up, to customize. It's a good CMS. OpenCart is for building online stores. I don't know if I'd build an online store today. I'd probably just go to Amazon or something, or well, I'm spacing out for names, but I'd probably go to an existing one and just build my store on an existing site because they get a lot of customers coming in. But you know, if I was selling something that was, there are times you need to build your own site, your own sales site. Like if you're selling something that Amazon doesn't allow on it. Nuclear bombs or something, I don't know. Drupal is one that's used by a lot of people, clubs and stuff. Oh, WordPress. WordPress has really become a very popular CMS for doing things like all sorts of things, travel sites, lots of sites. WordPress is tricky. There's a WordPress.com, which provides you with WordPress services if you, free of charge, I think. Actually, I've got a site there that's free of charge, but and I'm not charged for it. But it's also software, and there's lots and lots and lots of um, places you can go that will give you WordPress sites. There's one called Plone, which actually it's Zope/Plone, or they say um, um, it's all written in Python. And I don't know if many people use Plone or not. I love Plone. It's a great system. Okay, and then there's specialized ones. Oh, OpenACS. I don't have much to say about that except the developer for that is in Portland, lives in Portland. But there's specialized sites like Moodle. Moodle is one that is used for developing education sites. It's basically the open source equivalent to Desire to Learn. And it works very well. And it's used by schools like OSU and a lot of schools use Moodle. Sometimes just a department here or there, sometimes the entire university. There are several learning management systems that are open source. I think there's a couple I think are better than Moodle, but Moodle is the most popular. Okay. Back. I think, back here, let's look, back here. Database software. Okay, there's a lot of database software for Linux that's open source. Probably the big ones though is MySQL. Most websites, I don't know why this is, but most like CMSs that need to use a database usually use MySQL, and more they've been saying MySQL or MariaDB. A lot of sites that used to use MySQL are now using MariaDB. And some of them will use Postgres. Now, all of these are classical SQL-based relational database management systems. And the ones I mentioned, the three that I mentioned will handle big databases. Postgres is more popular with scientific users and business users that aren't worried about web things. MySQL people, they tend to be webby. But the people worried about just pure business or pure science tend to use MySQL, tend to use Postgres. And some people say Postgres is a little more stable and more robust. And MySQL is a little faster. Most things I hear Postgres is much better than MySQL, but that's because I drink beer with Postgres developers. They're very biased towards Postgres. If I drank beer elsewhere, it'd be different. Anyway, but Postgres is really good. I did some work years ago with Postgres with a huge, just unbelievably huge database of Postgres. It had every reading from every weather station ever taken in the US, I think, or something of that type. It was just a monster. It was used for atmospheric modeling or climate and weather modeling. And it had a massive amount of data from historic data from weather stations, like, thousands and thousands of weather stations and taking data every few minutes in some cases, but several times a day, certainly, dating back to before 1900. So massive, and it performed really well. The other thing I might mention about Postgres is there's something in Postgres called PostGIS, I think it's called, which is a way of linking geographic information data to Postgres. And it's wonderful if you're into geographic information data. Graphical software. Graphical software, well, there's two types of graphical software. There's the people that, there's GIMP. We should have much better lists than this. GIMP is the big one, but there's a lot of photo viewers like Dolphin is great for just viewing a photo. There's a little one I use called XV. It's hard to get because the guy screwed up the license. It's one of these that are sort of open source, but not really. So it's XV is included with like no it's not included in anyone's distributions. Let's see, let's shrink this. Eight. XV. PNG. Okay, and it just basically, I like it in part because it's really fast. It will bring up a little soft, it will bring up your diagram. It doesn't let you do much with it, but you can resize your thing. You can, I guess you can blur it. You can do various things like that. You can, convert it to other formats. So it's a good way to convert a GIF file to a PBM or a PBM to a JPEG file or whatnot. You can also crop things out of your files. You can twist them, a few things like that. You can put labels on them. It's not a fancy program, but it works. Other graphical software. Well, another piece of graphical, I guess this is graphical software. Maybe it's not. Let's go back here. Well, we'll get a diversion here. Another piece of graphical software I like is called Inkscape. Now, Inkscape is a little bit like GIMP, except GIMP is for doing raster graphics, which is what you have like in a photograph. Where everything is basically in a matrix. It's in pixels. Every pixel is on or off. GIMP or Inkscape is for doing vector graphics, where you're drawing lines. And I don't know what I'm doing here. I'd have to get up a drawing, but basically, you're drawing lines and circles, and GIMP stores those in a format called SVG for something vector graphics, super vector graphics or something, I don't know. And that is a format where instead of storing things as pixels, it stores it as vectors, so that if you blow your drawing up, if you blow up a raster drawing, eventually it gets very pixelized. If you blow up a vector drawing, you're actually, you've got straight lines or curves, and you can blow it up a lot more before it gets pixelized. I suppose eventually maybe it will kind of get pixelized, because if you draw your curves without a lot of straight line segments before, at a certain point, they're no longer curves. But a lot of the curves are actually drawn as curves, so you can blow them up as much as you want. Anyway, it's a cool tool. Along the same lines, there's a tool called Dia. Well, so much for that. What Dia is it's like Microsoft Visio. It will let you draw things like network diagrams or diagrams of diagrams of other things, chemical engineering, chronograms, circuits for drawing circuits. Oh, this is Cisco stuff. Cisco networks, Cisco switches, civil engineering drawings, electrical drawings, flow charts. Anyway, it's got icons for drawing lots of drawings. A lot of their icons aren't very pretty, but you can load your own icons. And I've been able to do some pretty nice work with Dia. Dia is one of those programs that looks like it's not a great program when you first start to use it. And the more you use it, the more you basically say, yeah, it's actually not that bad a program. It's not quite as good as Microsoft Visio, but since I don't have Visio, since I don't have Windows, I don't have Visio, Dia will do the trick for me. And I'm not totally happy with Microsoft Visio either, so Dia's, somebody should fork Dia and link Dia to a database and actually make a good system. Yeah. So much for that. Other types of software. Well, let's go back here. Let's get out our thing. Video software. There's a lot of video software for Linux. Of course, the software I use VLC a lot. VLC will let you watch videos that are, well, you can either watch videos over the network, which I don't do very much with VLC, but you can watch your own videos with VLC. I think it's mostly for watching things. I don't know that there's much editing based in that. There's also, though, going down here, there is OBS, which will let you, I don't know too much about OBS. I don't use it much. But my son swears by OBS because it will let you bring in various streams of media, several streams of media, and you can manipulate your streams of media and put them together to form a video out of them. He's a musician and he uses OBS some for building music videos. And he thinks it's pretty decent for building music videos. Or any type of video, actually. Another piece of software that I do use is sometimes I need screencasting software. If you do a search for Linux screencasting software, oh, I should mention, while I mention like OBS, that for doing audio software, there's Audacity, which will let you manipulate audio files. And it does a really good job with audio files. It will let you do almost anything with audio files. At least anything I ever want to do with audio files. And well, mostly you can change the volume, you can cut little pieces out of them, you can add pieces into them, you can move your audio files. You can also do a certain amount of automatic processing by using filters. So like if you're catching the music from a 33 record or something like that, it sometimes has a lot of low frequency noise that the diamond needle makes with as it goes around the grooves in the record. You can take a lot of that out using Odyssey. It's quite good, and of course it runs on Windows as well as Linux, but it was written for Linux or Unix. Screencasting software. There are dozens of screencasting pieces of screencasting software that basically they capture your screen as you go. I mean, we're using screencasting software right now because we're recording this video. But there are ones where you don't have to go to Zoom. Actually, Zooms does a good job. Sometimes nowadays I just go to Zoom and I save it and I record the Zoom. Except Zoom has these little quirks that it leaves on the screen. Maybe it doesn't do that with Windows, but you notice the quirks in my videos that I do with the screen recording software. They frustrate me, but well, here's some screen recording software. I just talked about OBS. OBS, one of the streams that they'll let you capture is your screens. So OBS is used as a screen capture software. This says it's very good. I don't know. I have used it for capturing screens. I haven't used it enough to say whether it's good or bad, but they say it's good. GPU screen, I don't know what this one is. FFmpeg is one that I used to use a great deal. FFmpeg is command line driven. It's all command lines, and FFmpeg, the command lines are very useful. You can do things like convert file format, video formats from one video format to another video format. You can capture your entire screen and audio as well. using FFmpeg, and it works pretty well, pretty darn well, because I used it for years. And then I decided other things work better, but it still works. I still use it for some things. It works very well. You can actually edit your videos somewhat by using FFmpeg, but it's command line editing, which is a little weird, but yeah. And it works. It works really well. Simple Screen Recorder. I think that's the one I use. Yeah, Simple Screen Recorder is the one that I use. It's really easy to use. It works really well. Many of the videos I've made, I use Simple Screen Recorder. I've actually looked at probably 9 or 10 different screen recording systems. Some of them, they don't capture things at the right screen resolution. Some of them have trouble keeping your voice in sync with your picture. So they don't, the voice gets lost. Actually, with one of them, it was so bad that I would have to, the only way I could get things halfway straight is I would capture the voice with Audacity and capture the screen with whatever the other system was, and then I'd try to sync those together. Boy, that is a horrible task, trying to sync things once they're out of sync. But Simple Screen Recorder is really good. I like it a lot. There's one called, yeah, well, you see, this is only a very few of the ones I've looked at. They don't rank Simple Screen Recorder as high as I would. I think it's really wonderful. Okay. Well, we've pretty well there's software for most any task you want. In the GIS world, there's a package I've used a lot called Grass. Grass is hard to use, but it's command line driven pretty much. Actually, I worked on the Grass software quite a bit at one time. It's probably where I learned to program C fairly fluently. Grass is really nice software, but it isn't very friendly. So there has been a kind of a rewrite of Grass, a new GIS that I have used much less, called QGIS. These are big, heavy-duty GISs that will do a lot of things for you. I mean, I've used these, I used Grass at BLM for a long time for heavy duty GIS. I mean, this was a project we had, my company was a contractor on the project, the lead contractor, and we had a couple hundred employees at one point. So, Grass worked very well. And QGIS, I think, would do that today and do it in a more friendly fashion. I also use the Grass with the Oregon State University College of Oceanography. Well, actually, not oceanography. Yes, I worked for them, but I didn't use Grass there. I used it when I worked for atmospheric sciences at Oregon State University, doing atmospheric modeling. And it worked very well. And it linked very well. It linked super well with the the Postgres database, which makes everything work really well. And to link one more, there is a statistical package. In the proprietary world, there's a statistical package called CIS, which is widely used for doing statistics. In fact, my wife, who is a mathematical statistician, used SAS for years. I always tried to convince her to use R, but the open source alternative to SAS is a program called R, which is really, it's supposed to be a programming language, but it's just for statistics and mathematics. And it's very, very powerful. It's also very, very complex. And it's got links to the GRASS GIS so that when you're doing GIS, you can use Postgres, you can use R, and they're all kind of combined together. That's really good. There's also some CAD, computer-aided design packages for Linux. If you ask me, Linux is a little weak on computer-aided design. I've never found one that I really fell in love with. There's, I think it's OpenCAD. There's, I can't remember. There are some CAD packages. I think that's an area Linux could still have a better CAD package than they've got. There's no equivalent to AutoCAD. There are some equivalents to maybe old versions of AutoCAD, but yeah. There are some things as good as AutoCAD was 20 years ago, which was still pretty good, but I mean, it's not where we are today. I should mention in terms of video software or CAD or something, there is a package called Blender that comes out of Holland. And Blender is really a great package for doing 3D renderings. And you can set up light sources and it will show you, you can build an object, a 3D object, and you put lights here and there, and it will show you where your shadows are. And people use Blender for making art and stuff. There's also a lot of music software for Linux. That's more my son's thing. There's Lily Pond for doing Linux music notation. Yeah. Anyway, I hope from this you get the impression that there are applications for Linux. Linux really is becoming more of a server computer operating system than a desktop operating system. Linux has pretty much failed on the desktop, except for a few of us geeks. But there's enough of us geeks around that I think we're going to see Linux used on the desktop for applications for a long time, especially because applications may be becoming less available for in the Windows world and the Mac world as more and more things go to the cloud. And if you don't like the cloud, you may be in a position where Linux is one of the major options you have. And it's good to know that there are a lot of options there, because because they fit a lot of people. For one thing, the pricing of them fits a lot of people who otherwise could not afford to be doing the things they're doing. And so I think that's cool. That's everything I had to say. I will be here. I'll stick around for an hour or so. And I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and do take some time and spend some time with your family and stuff. Thanks, family is important, and family and friends, family is important, and Thanksgiving is a really good holiday, and it's of course the beginning of the holiday season in general, but I think Thanksgiving is really important to everybody except turkeys, who don't look favorably on Thanksgiving, but that's, yeah. Okay, bye-bye.